What's it called? Inside Property and Finance. Hello and welcome to the podcast Inside Property and Finance.
Yep.
Is that it? Sounds weird.
The Inside Property and Finance podcast.
The Inside Property and Finance podcast. Hey!
And it's Express Mortgages, not Mortgage
Mortgage Express. Oh my God. Hello, welcome to the Inside Property and Finance podcast. I'm joined here with both Paul and Steve, and we're going to get into a topic that I think is very topical at the moment, in the sense that many investors, they're always asking questions around, should I buy property at auction? And if I do, what are the finance options available for me? Because when you buy at auction, you've got to move quickly. So let's get into that whole conversation. First and foremost, what's your thoughts on buying at auction before I get into my own? Kick us off, Paul.
I think people gravitate towards it when they've not been in property a long time. I think they just think, oh, that's where you go and get cheap property from. And well, I'll let you come on to that in a minute, because you're far more averse to how that all works. But the thing what I'd always say to people is, before you even get to the finance, try and understand the auctions, because they are emotional spaces, and we do see people come into us and they've paid way over what they should do because they don't want to get beaten, but that's auctions for you. Not reading legal packs, not understanding that they've got 28 days to complete on that, and that's important when it comes to finance, because you've got to be able to get from A to B in that time, or else it's very expensive. So I would never say to people, don't buy at auctions, but make sure you understand the process before you go. For God's sake, set a limit and stick to that limit, but don't just assume that that's the best place to go and buy property. Yes, you can get bargains, but there's a lot of things that go through auction that aren't maybe such a bargain, or there's other techniques as well that I'm sure you'll elaborate on that can create even better profits in purchasing. So definitely not against it, but make sure you've done your research, stick to your guns.
Yeah, for sure. What about you, Steve? What's your thoughts on them?
Do you know, many years ago I worked at an auction, it was a temporary position, so I had a bit of exposure to one. And my thoughts are, you've got to have quite a lot of self-control, quite a lot of discipline. There's people that get carried away, like you just said, Paul. So I think if you do your research, do your due diligence, know what an asset in that area costs, and don't get carried away by the emotion of the room. I quite like the idea of the modern online auction. I think I can see there's a lot of sort of value to that. It's quite good from a time point of view. You're not going away for the whole day, are you, to visit a room and bid. So and also I guess if you're doing a lot of ads, spending a lot on ads, and you're getting properties coming towards you, deals coming towards you, it's a place to dispose of some of those unwanted deals that don't meet your criteria. So I quite like it for a few reasons.
Yeah, so those proactive investors who are sourcing their own properties, especially if they're spending money on advertising and marketing, it's a way to liquidate their ad spend, isn't it? Because there's going to be properties that they just can't sell, because there's that type of property that the only place really can sell it is an auction, isn't it? So passing on to a partnered auction company is good to get paid, because you can get paid quite well.
Yeah.
So that's what I always recommend for anyone who is out there sourcing property. If you've got an alliance, a referral commission as such with another auction company, then you could get paid £500 to £1,000. So if you've got those properties that don't fit your own criteria to keep yourself, or you don't trade them on, because there's many strategies, isn't there? It's just those ones that if you've got a partner, you can pass it on and make money. My thoughts on auction is, and there's a thing called Pareto's principle. It's the 80-20 rule, right? And when I apply that in all things in business, what I mean by that is that I'm looking for, where am I going to have an 80% probability of having success in finding a deal? And when you're looking at an auction house or going to an actual auction, or even on these online auctions, Pareto's principle does not work in your favour. In my mind, it's like 1 in 100 is a possible deal, because again, keep in mind that most properties that go to auction are there for a reason, because if there wasn't some underlying problems or issues, it would make it to an estate agents, right? It would be on the market. So most people are not prepared to spend hundreds of pounds on specialist surveys, or many people who go to auctions don't have the right knowledge when they're viewing property to find those issues, find those problems, because every problem can be resolved. But what you don't want to do is have an episode of Homes Under the Hammer when you buy a home.
Just gonna say
you buy a property and then you go, oh shit, overpaid, and not only that, there's this problem and that problem, and my refurb is now going to be this. And that's where you see so many horror stories. So for me, it's you can look at properties on auction, but there's many other strategies that are far greater to weigh the averages in your favour to get deals. So I never diss auctions altogether, because there is deals to be had, especially if you know what you're looking for, and especially if you do what you're saying there's not being emotionally tied. But in that case, it's like it's going to be a bit deflating, the amount of times that you're putting offers in and getting outbidded by emotional buyers. Now, if you get any more take on that, then of course I'm happy to have a discussion around that. But I think what would be good is in the off chance that those investors do find a deal at auction, a question I guess I would ask is, what's the process from finance, especially around this whole 28 days? Because normally you've got to put a deposit down, which is 10%, and then come up with the balance. And a lot of people think, well, I'm going to have to just buy cash. Mm-hmm. But there's other options. So maybe we could discuss that.
Well, there's actually a phrase in our industry to call it auction finance. Now, it's just another name for bridging finance, generally speaking, because as you alluded to, these properties, there's normally a problem with them. That means that they're not often going to meet buy-to-let valuation criteria or generate rent and that. So there's only one option. But in reality, it doesn't matter how quick we work and how quick the client works with us, with a buy-to-let lender, to get a mortgage offer out and get a solicitor to complete on that inside 28 days is not impossible, but certainly unlikely. And then you're into penalties, aren't you, or losing your deposit ultimately. So you really are talking about auction finance or bridging finance. And even then, there are bridging finance companies that will struggle to hit a 28-day turnaround. So it is specific lenders. So we would always encourage people that prior to going to the auction to reach out and actually look at the cost of, because the cost of finance should be part of, is that a deal worth having or not, yeah? Mm-hmm. But too many people phone us up, I've just bought this, yeah? And it's even quite often not the one that they went to buy. They lost out on the one, or it got withdrawn from the auction. So just thought, oh, while I'm here, I'll just buy something else.
I've got to buy something.
Yeah. And so we're already on the back foot as a company, finding that solution. But the first thing is, we know from experience of all those bridging companies out there, the ones that can get things turned around in not just 28 days, but a week, 2 weeks, and not put people under that pressure. And I guess my only tip there from a borrowing point of view is listen to the broker, because they're doing it day in, day out. And yeah, there might be that lender that you see on the internet, as we are, that's rates from, why am I not getting it this cheap? You say, well, you can have it that cheap and you'll save 0.01%, but you're probably going to pay a whole heap more than that in penalties for running over. So be realistic and be prepared. But yeah, it's a simple case of some lenders are suitable for it, other lenders aren't.
Yeah, so talk us through that process. So assuming you're just about to, an investor's going to go to an auction, they've got eyes on a couple of properties, they've done a due diligence, they've done everything I would hope as a professional investor would do, they've got things firmed up, then at least they're having that conversation with, the team at Express, especially those that specialise in bridge and finance, because talk me through some of the questions they'll ask to really help the investor get a bit more comfort, so when they go to auction, at least they know that they've got finance lined up if they were to be successful. So maybe talk us through that.
Yeah, so some of the questions that we'd have to check is, what's the purchase price, what's the open market value? Sometimes
so on that, with the purchase price, we're going to make assumptions, I guess, aren't we?
Yeah.
And the assumption we should be making is knowing the maximum that you're prepared to pay, right? So if it goes for less, then great, you're going to get better finance terms and stuff, but that's the number, just in case you're sitting there thinking, well, I don't know what I'm going to pay for it. No, you should know. You should know your maximum number. Yeah. So carry on, Steve.
Purchase price. What funds have you got available, like to put down? Are you looking to lend against the purchase price, or do you want to lend against the open market value? that can be a problem with with auctions, of course, because if we're lending against the open market value, then a physical valuation needs to happen, which takes longer. And if we're restricted to 28 days, I know it can differ. Some auctions have been less than that, haven't they? Some auctions have been 56 days. So that's key as well. But understanding what time scale we've got. Do you need to lend against the open market? Can we get away with lending against the purchase price? What funds have you got available? Is it your funds? Is it investor funds? Have you done it before? All these kind of questions so we can build up a picture. Some lenders aren't concerned if you've not done it before. That's fine. They'll lend for your first one. Others like to see a project or two done before of similar ilk. So again, just helps us go down the right path, doesn't it, with the lenders?
And obviously, if it's properties that they're looking to improve or need improving, which is more the case, what's it going to cost to take it from its current state to a saleable or lettable state? How long is that going to take you to achieve that? And of course, what do we need to add on top of that to allow for a refinance project or a sale project? Because as we tell people all the time, the first thing you start with this type of finance is your exit. It's so important to make sure your exit is solid. So they don't need, and I think this is what puts a lot of people off auctions at times with a finance. They think that we need to know very fine details on what's it going to cost to renovate it and broken down exactly. But it's hard to get in some of these properties at times. But people who are in it tend to know that kind of property is going to cost me a maximum of 30,000 to renovate it from experience. So a bit like what you just said earlier, always work on the
Worst case.
purchase price maximum that you're prepared to go to. Work on the worst case that's going to cost to do the property up if you're unable to have got in and done a proper assessment. But from those figures, it's, like Steve says, maximum purchase price. If there's renovation works needed, what's the maximum that you're going to spend on that? The term, what's it going to be worth at the end, and are you going to sell it or are you going to flip it? And from that, we can generate very accurate, what we call heads of terms. So for those new to bridging or auction finance, that's a little bit like your everyday mortgage. We call it an agreement in principle or a decision in principle. It's the equivalent. There's not a lot of assessment on the individual needed because bridging really is based on the asset more so than the individual. But we can generate that, and from that, the investor can then say, right, that finance is going to cost me X. My maximum price on that property, actually, I'm going to have to maybe lower it, or actually, that's not as bad as I thought. I can maybe pay a little bit more than what I was prepared to, and it still works. So that's a big tip, like, make sure you do this. Get one of the guys in the team to assess it. They'll put it out to market, come back, maybe even with 2 or 3 sets of terms, so you can see. But more so with lenders who are going to do it in time.
Yeah, this is why I always talk about, as an investor, you've got to have your power team in place, haven't you? And the most important person in your power team is your broker, because they can open up your finance options. And as Paul just mentioned there, you might not just get one head of terms, you might get multiple to choose from. And when you're dealing with auction finance, because you've got such a short time frame, the quicker you engage with your broker, and this is why we've got the right people who specialise in this within Express, which is great because, they are familiar with this, right? They can actually coach and help you through the whole process too, in terms of getting those head of terms and the different rates and getting competitive and everything else, but more importantly, being able to turn it around. I think that you were telling us, Steve, that one of the, a recent one, you were able to get actual terms within like a day or two, was it?
Yeah, credit-backed terms.
Credit-backed terms.
Yeah,
so maybe just explain the difference from head of terms to credit-backed terms and how that happened very quickly.
Yeah, so heads of terms. In fact, there's sites that we can go on and get heads of terms right now, within minutes. But they're not it's not that they're not worth the paper they're written on. It's just that it's
numbers
punching us
based.
in numbers.
Yeah,
numbers-based terms. Credit-backed terms is when somebody in an official capacity, like an underwriter, has gone through that application and decided, yes, we're prepared to lend on that. So it's like a formal offer, if you want to look at it that way in mortgage world. But yeah, we can get to that stage in 24, 48 hours, and then it's just down to the legal side. So we've had cases complete within 1 and 2 weeks before.
Yeah, and this is great to be aware of as an investor, because many people, especially when they're buying at auction, they'll buy cash. And sure, that's fine, but all the time this is what I focus on and get people to realise, because I get it. They look at bridging and go, what costs money? Or, of course it does, but you need to be thinking about cash on cash return on your investment. Did you have to tie all your capital up into one property transaction? Or did you, the way I look at it, joint venture with the bridge and finance company and look at what your profits would be off the back of that against the money you actually had to put in? Because likelihood is, if you use bridging in this example, you maybe have one pot of cash that could be spread across multiple properties, not just the one. And that's how you get a far greater cash on cash return. So for those who are maybe used to buying cash or, are apprehensive because of the time frames, this is why you should engage with your broker. And if you've got the right brokers, such as Express and in the house, we've got, a great team there that can actually help and give you the confidence that when you've got a deal, at least you're able to know that you can get that finance and funding relatively quickly. And it means that you can leverage the funding to do multiple deals. And that's the whole idea, to really drive up your cash on cash return.
Yeah, and here's a misconception with people. So I've had this conversation with a lot of investors all the time. It's all leverage concept, yeah? And you get to know them and say, yeah, well, what I want to do is I want to be in that project, and as that one's coming to the end, I want to be going into that project and so on. And I say, how do you know when the next one arrives? And they say, well, you don't. Sometimes they just come out of the woodwork. I said, well, what if you just need the money for that next one and you've put it all into this? And this is the misconception. They go, I'll just borrow against that when I need it. But what funders don't like is when you've already bought the house, you've half ripped it to pieces and then bridging on something, because it sets alarm bells ringing with them. Why are they borrowing money all of a sudden? Is it really for another project? Or are they really struggling with this one and things? So it's a far easier for finance to be put on a project right from the very beginning. And going slightly off piste, whether that be, at auction, developments, out the ground, funders want to be there from the beginning. And, as we find time and time again, we've had people where they've gone against that advice, they've put all the money into one project, the next thing pops up, it's an absolute stormer, but they've got to act quick to get it at a storming discount, and all of a sudden extracting money out of that half-finished project means that one goes missing. So again, it's not for everyone to always be leveraging, I get that, but just, again, bear that in mind. Pumping all your money into one project can suffocate the next one. And probably just to finish on that, I always look at our most successful property investors, and they tend to get a team of contractors together, don't they? Their own like construction power team. And the last thing they want to do, especially at the minute when there's a paucity of skilled labour, is not have those guys constantly in things. So the most successful people have always got maybe 2 or 3 projects running simultaneously. So one will be almost finished, one will be they're putting it back together, and one will be on rip out. And then they just keep rotating it, don't they? And the way they do that, they use finance to leverage themselves so they can keep those projects running. And then they're just moving the lads and lasses, let's not be sexist, from one project to the next.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's good stuff when you start to see the power of being able to leverage, and this is what I always try and get people to understand and see, that you can do so much more with the power of leverage. That's leveraging other people's money, finance, funders, bridging, private investment, leveraging other people's time, your power team, so getting those people around, and then you can do so much more. So I think to summarise on this episode here, make sure you do your numbers, make sure you do your due diligence, make sure you go in with your eyes wide open, and make sure that before you start putting those offers in, you don't get emotionally caught up. You know your maximum number. Make sure you've done that due diligence. Then engage with your broker. And of course, head over to expressmortgages.co.uk. You can reach out to us, and we've got that specialist team there that can help you with that initial conversation with what you're about to go ahead and buy, so that you can get yourself set up, ready to leverage that finance as and when you require. Now, of course, if you get any questions, pop them in the comments below. We'll be keeping an eye on them. We can go in there and respond to them as well. And then, as always, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and I look forward to speaking to you again. All the best, and bye for now.